Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Johnson and I am a sophomore here at CBU. I have never done this before, so I don't think I'm doing it right, but here goes nothing. My project is called Digging into the Imagination and the connection between enclosed space and the imagination. So the passage I chose to talk about was the second passage. That was our option, and you can read it on the screen, but I'll read it aloud as well. With nests and above all shelves, we shall find a whole series of images that I am going to try to characterize as primal images. Images that bring out the primitiveness in us. I shall then show that a human being likes to withdraw into his corner. The point of departure of my reflections is the following. Every corner in a house, every angle in a room, every inch of secluded space in which we like to hide or withdraw into ourselves is a symbol of solitude for the imagination. So I believe that each human being desires a place where they can find solitude and feel free to the imagination. And I believe that Bachelor is talking about this as well, obviously. But what does this idea of enclosed spaces that he's talking about actually look like? And I think that it looks different for every individual and their circumstances, and it's relative. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, why I think that. But this passage does discuss rooms in a house, which is where our main character in the poem Digging, that I'll discuss later, finds his space where he can go farther into literature and his own writing and really dig into his imagination and his free thinking. And he's able to really get into himself, withdraw into himself, kind of what this passage is talking about, and find a place of solitude for the imagination. However, this passage also does discuss a secluded place where we just withdraw into ourselves. Now, I'm just talking about this because I want to address the whole passage, but I'm going to be talking about the idea of rooms and that sort of thing mainly, but I think that as a whole, when Bachelor is talking about space in this sense, it is wherever someone finds their space for imagination. So, if that's outside, great. If that's inside, great. If that's in a room, great. If that's while you're cooking, if that's while you're on a walk or whatever. I think that it's wherever, again, someone finds their freedom for self thinking on their own and that sort of thing. I know for me, I definitely find this when I'm on a hike in the mountains or I'm on a run and I'm kind of alone with my thoughts, and my imagination can run free and I think about whatever. But for the purpose of this project, however, I will be discussing the idea of rooms and that space of our own. So I wanted to, sorry, I'm just a little bit all over the place. I'm sick, and so sorry if my voice is nasally also. So I wanted to discuss, again, sorry, bringing it back to I'm actually going to go back, bringing it back to space, and it doesn't have to be in a room. Again, if that's outside, great. If that's inside, great. It's obviously relative. It's if you are a person that you feel hindered by, if you're in a room, if you feel stressed, or if you feel like you should be only doing homework or whatever in your room or the library or something, then obviously your imagination isn't going to feel free. Where for like in my case, I think that my room, because I live in a dorm by myself, I have that my room is kind of serves as a lot of purposes. It serves as the space for me to do my homework and the nitty-gritty life stuff, but it also leaves space for me to just sit on my bed and think about life, whatever. And I'll talk about my own experiences a little bit later as well. But anyway, so going back to Digging, I think that this poem has kind of a hidden message of the relativeness of space, and where one person might find their space for imagination one place, another person is completely different and doesn't feel that freedom in that place that the other person feels. Obviously, this poem is about heritage and honoring family and work and your homeland. But I think it also is about digging. I realized how much I say digging when I'm talking about literature when I'm writing about this poem, because I always am like, oh, haha, digging. Anyway, so I think it's also about digging into this idea of space. So our main character is looking out into the past of his family and his grandfather and his father working out in the fields and digging with shovels, and they're digging potatoes, where he's trying to figure out a way he can honor his homeland and family, but he doesn't really identify with this digging of potatoes. And I usually say when I'm talking about this poem, it's a difference of tools, it's relative. So while his family past has dug with shovels, he digs with his pen into his room. And so he's honoring them by, I think the last like 3 lines of the poem are so beautiful that say, like, the pen that rests between my fingers, I will dig. And so he's talking about this whole time of his his grandfather and father digging, and they're honoring their family and themselves with their tool, a shovel, and he's going to honor them with his tool, a pen. So again, that pen allows him to dig deeper into literature, and again, his space of his room allows him to dig deeper into his imagination. So I want to talk a little bit about the idea of the mundane, because I think that this poem has a lot to do with that. So writing is his mundane. That's his work. That's it's his love, it's his work, it's all the things. His life is focused around that. And so obviously vocation isn't everyone's, if you're working at a place and that's not your ideal, that's not your love, that's okay. But in this case, writing was his, and that's his life, where his father and his grandfather, their life was digging potatoes. And anyway, so I think that with their mundane, I know, at least for me, that when I'm doing kind of a passive job, obviously like agriculture is not passive, but there's a lot of repetitiveness where you don't have to be thinking the whole time. And I think that these men, when they're doing this every day, they have a lot of time to themselves where it's kind of, I can kind of go off a little bit in my thoughts. So I think that in their mundane, I'm assuming that they were able to kind of get into their own imagination and think about relationships and think about their family and different thoughts they have. And I know, at least for me, when I'm working at home, I work at a restaurant, and I know that when I'm doing the dishes at the end of the night, or when I'm cooking a long line of food and I'm just kind of looking at the tickets and I know how to do it, I don't really have to think about it. I know that my thoughts kind of wander to other things as well. And so I'm sure that I'm assuming that this, where they spend a lot of their time, is where they get their space of imagination and their free thought. And I think, so again, that goes back to, it's relative. It doesn't have to be in a room. It doesn't have to be in a corner of a room. It doesn't have to be wherever, it's up to you as a human being and how you're wired. But I think that a good example is an experience I had last year. Being in a dorm last year as a freshman, I had a roommate, and so I think that my space of like a room was hindered, or my space of imagination in a room was hindered by the fact that I had another person in there, and I don't think I was able to as freely think as possible, because I'm a processor. Like, I like to think out loud as well. And so, but now this year I'm an RA in the same dorm, and so I have my own room. And I've been talking to people a lot about this idea of space recently and creating our own space of comfort and that sort of thing. And I think I've definitely created a space in my room that, yeah, sure, again, like I talked about earlier, sure, yeah, I do my laundry in here, I do my homework in here, do all the things, do my dishes in here, my little sink. But also, like, this is my space to have my time with the Lord and have my time of journaling and free thought. And so I'm able to be more boisterous and out there with my thoughts, where when I'm alone, the solitude, finding that place of solitude, rather than last year, where I wasn't able to find that as well. But wrapping up, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Anyway, wrapping up, I'm almost out of time. But I just wanted to ask you guys, where do you find your space of imagination and creativity? And maybe if you choose to watch mine and you've reached this point, good job. If you've watched 10 minutes, you deserve a star. But maybe just in your comment, talk about where you find your imagination and your space for creativity. Thanks for listening. Bye.